Hello and good morning. I hope everyone's keeping well. Um, I thought I might take a moment just to talk about the fuel systems on both the SK and the NG, and talk about the modifications I've done over a period of time to help improve things from my perspective anyway. Um, so when I first brought the NG and the SK, they both came with steel tanks, and it must be a trait of steel tanks. Both tanks were full of moisture, full of rust, and just generally absolutely full of crap. So whenever I took one of these vehicles out, particularly the pre-filter, would just, every trip you'd be emptying out and cleaning out the pre-filters. On the NG, it's not really an issue because being such a short day cab, and being a naturally aspirated engine, the fuel filter's on the back of the engine, so you can get to it very easily. It's not an issue. The SK, on the other hand, being a full sleeper cab and being a turbocharged engine, the fuel filter's at the front of the engine. So if ever you've got to do anything with the fuel filters or pre-filter, you have to tilt the cab up, which isn't much fun. So I did try to clean out the fuel tanks. I did periodically, for probably several months. I was constantly trying to clean out the fuel tanks, have them off, sluice them out. Got a fuel pump and a great big, bloody great big filter to try and suck out all the crap. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to improve. So eventually I got the ump with it, and I was just wondering about alternatives. And I did consider maybe trying to buy replacement steel tanks, but I think for the NG, they were no longer available. I could be wrong in saying that, but I think at the time they were no longer available. For the SK, they were available, but like anything Mercedes, it was quite expensive. I didn't really fancy going down that road. So in the end, I ended up buying two second-hand aluminium fuel tanks. So the aluminium fuel tank on the NG is from an Actros. It was taken off, from what I can gather, it was taken off a new Actros that was being converted to something else. So that was where that tank came from. The tank on the Mercedes is an Arvico tank, and that was very, very cheap. But it's from the same factory that provides them for most manufacturers, so that's not really an issue. But yes, I changed the fuel tanks, put a pair of aluminium fuel tanks on it. That drastically improved everything all round. But particularly with the NG, being that the pre-filter is so small, the SK has got the same pre-filter as the early Actroses, I believe, and early MANs. They're about at least twice the size of the pre-filters on these NGs. So I was occasionally having to clean out the pre-filter still. So again, it's not much fun, especially on the SK, although it was less of an issue on the SK. Being that it was bigger, well, it's difficult to get to tilt the cab up. But so I went online and started looking at maybe an inline filter, and I came across an inline filter that seemed to be perfect. It's a decent sized filter, big filter, cheap. I think I brought a bag of a dozen for like half the price of a single standard Mercedes fuel filter. So they're just cheap plastic throwaway. They do the job fantastically well. So I fitted those on. The NG, it's a complete mess at the back there. I did have it relatively tidy, but since I've had it off the road for a couple of years, I took the catwalk off, so it's just sat there on the pipes at the moment. The SK, again, for many years it was cable tied on. Eventually, just now, I've finally made improvements, and now it's finally fitted better, far better than it was. It clips in, clips out. It's much more of a permanent fixture than a cable tie on a piece of rubber. But no, fitting the aluminium fuel tanks along with the inline fuel filter has made a huge difference. So the combination of the two, I change the fuel filters once every couple of years now. In between, I don't touch them. and in fact the SK, since the SK is the only one currently on the road, I've not even taken the pre-filter off for 3 years now. Is it a bit dodgy? Maybe, but it's semi-translucent, so you can sort of get a rough idea if there's anything in there. But you've got the pre-filter in the tank, the inline filter. That seems to catch probably easily 90% of anything that comes up that pipe, out of that tank. After that, not really anything gets caught in the pre-filters anymore. The fuel filters, they do go black, but they don't ever block up. I'll run them for a couple of years before I change them. You take them out and they're completely black, but they don't ever seem to block up. But that was it really. There's a couple of other little, going away from the fuel system a little bit. When I was at Gaydon, I was advised by Chris and Dominic that I really ought to put a safety clip through the battery box, because apparently they'd been known, they were not too uncommon to be found at the side of the motorway where they came off. So I've done that. I've also advised, because I've still got on the back of the SK, I've got the automatic chassis lubrication, although it doesn't work currently. I'm in two minds whether to repair it or just leave it as it is and just manually grease stuff. But I've still got the case and everything for the chassis lubrication, and on top we've got a plastic top, and it just lifts off. It stays on there, but it lifts off. And something they suggested, I will cable tie that down, which, to be fair, I probably ought to. So I'm just about to do that now, actually. But yeah, I think I've covered everything I wanted to on the fuel side. I know it's probably not to everyone's taste having aluminium fuel tanks as opposed to the original steel ones. I had considered, with the SK, because they were still available, I had considered putting a steel fuel tank back on. However, when I went up to Gaydon and I was chatting to Dominic and Chris with their 38 and their 22, or Chris's 38 and Dominic's 22 even, something Dominic was talking about, and I thought this was just an old wives' tale, but when I was working at Nichols, occasionally you'd hear people talk about diesel bug, and I always thought it was just a wind-up. But talking to Dominic in particular, he said no, it is a real thing. He said the reason modern lorries all have aluminium or plastic fuel tanks is because they seem to give off some sort of chemical or something that kills off this diesel bug, or this bacteria that lives in diesel, particularly with modern diesel being a percentage of biodiesel, which apparently they like. So ironically, I've stumbled into quite an ideal situation where I don't suffer with that. They suffer with it. Dominic apparently puts in additives to kill it off, but he said he still end up with clogged filters because the debris still gets sucked up into the filters even after you killed them off. Also, the other thing that I hadn't really appreciated with aluminium fuel tanks is that they seem to attract less moisture than steel. So again, knock-on effect, the filters last longer. So after being at Gaydon, having quite a lengthy discussion with both Chris and Dominic, I've sort of come to the conclusion that I'm going to keep them exactly as they are. They run really well. I don't think they look too out of place. I don't think they look too out of place at all. Maybe more so on the NG, because it's a stubby little fuel tank, whereas the SK, it's bigger than the original fuel tank. It's probably at least 50 litres bigger. But where I've got the big fuel tank and my tool locker alongside it, you don't really, to me, it doesn't stick out too badly. I would polish it up, but then again, I'd have to polish the whole vehicle up after that. But yeah, you may have noticed I'm sat in the NG today. I've not really paid it any attention for a few months, and I just thought I'd give it a bit of love. It doesn't start quite at the moment. The batteries need charging. Enough power to run the light, put a bit of light inside the cab so I can have a chat. But I need to charge them up, run it up. I will put this back on the road but that'll probably be a next year job, I think, at this rate. A couple of little jobs I like to do. But yeah, that's about it really. I hope you have a nice weekend. Hope it was interesting-ish. Hope you have a nice weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.